Slow Drag. It's one of my favorites. Cedar Walton on piano, Walter Booker on bass, Sonny Red on alto sax, and Billy Higgins on vocals and drums. This is a title track of his 1967 album, which was remastered in 2002 by Blue Note Records. This is Leid Stories. I'm Utrice Leid. And I thought we should pause today and assess exactly where we are, or at least where we think we are, in the broader scheme of things. It is not a good place to be from what we're seeing. And today it is important to just pause a little bit and discuss just what it is we are seeing on the national level as this tension builds and as we see people gearing up for a fight without calling it a fight. But I have a strong suspicion that we know we are just a razor-thin space away from an all-out fight in the United States. And it's going to be unlike any fight that we have seen. It starts off innocuous enough, and we attribute the state of affairs to the political pull and tug between parties of different or differing philosophies, of major players of differing philosophies, and we think, well, it's par for the course. After all, we're just around the corner from a national election, and we expect some of this stuff to happen. But are you comfortable with what has unfolded to date? What is the state of affairs? How would you describe the political atmosphere at this time? And how would you describe the messages? Because a lot of this has to do with messaging. And why do we look at messaging? Because messaging is a principal way, especially in recent years, in which the body politic and the references that the body politic would be using are disseminated. Our thinking is being shaped and influenced heavily by messages that are just sent out, but with specific intention. Messages now become purposeful. They're not just casual statements. The purpose of the messaging is to shape public opinion. Because when you shape public opinion, you shape public action. And we know that there is a very important link between messaging and shaping opinion and inevitably shaping action. This is not done by chance. It is not accidental, nor is it incidental. It is purposeful. So let us take some time today and discuss the shaping so far of public ideas, ideas in the public, shaping public thought. And even now, shaping public action and reaction. Mind you, there's no real contest yet. We're just leading up to it. But it is an important point in the course of or timeline of an election. At least this is what we have come to understand. It plays a very important part in an election. How is it that one party or the other, one candidate or the other, comes across, gets the point across that he or she wants to get across so as to animate interest in a potential voter? It's a marketing idea, but it's an old idea. It's a sales job. And in America, we tend to take things to the extreme. It is now an extreme sales job, because it has come to be seen as, I'm talking about elections, elections are contests of marketing. It has nothing to do with the substance of an election. I don't think anybody these days expects that any individual involved in elections or any party involved in elections truly wants to get across essential points about what the party or what the individual stands for, as a way of helping you decide where you put your vote. This is not an educational exercise about voting. For a long time now, it's essentially a sales job, a propaganda job, to influence your mind about whom and what you think you want to vote for, based on what you're told. And so you will be given every possible encouragement to sanitize your thinking so that you wouldn't find it too much of a problem if you are considering things that strictly do not belong in what you think a contest ought to be about. Principles, theories, beliefs. People selling you something, but what they're selling you has to do with bringing you into the fold of like-minded people who have a political way of seeing things. And the sales job is to get you more familiar with those things that the party or the person professes to promulgate, professes to stand for. This is a good time. Why? Because we've seen certain developments already occurring far ahead of the actual election, which means that in our minds, we should interpret that to mean that the political parties and the individuals running in these parties recognize that this is going to be a tough election. There's going to be a lot of fighting to garner support. And when there's a lot of fighting, there's a lot of lying, there's a lot of misdirection, because people in the long run, they just want your vote. They don't want to hear how you rationalize your vote or how any party's or person's explanation, political explanation for why they're running matters to you or doesn't matter to you. They just want the vote. And then you can get lost until the next harrowing election period. It is not about educating the public. It is not about exploring the differences in a very serious way. Why people see our solution as a nation to some of the major problems we're experiencing can be solved this way or that way. That's not the point of the election. The election is, can I sell this idea that I have in my head to you hard enough to compel you to adopt my view as yours? That's it. We are kidding ourselves if we think that it's about principle, that it is about exploring the academic differences and the realities, the political realities, local, national, international, that we have to consider as part of what the future of the country would be. That's not what's happening. And if we think that that's happening, may I assure you that you're way off the path. It's not happening. That's not what this season is designed to be. It's a crude, unbridled war between and among individuals. And what they're looking for is a hard and fast decision as quickly as possible to get you to understand that your job is to go to the polling place on election day and flick a lever for this person or that party or the other issue. That's it. Then you're done. You would have performed your civic duty. So, we've seen a lot of things happening, and we are inclined to believe, well, you know, it's just politics, but it's not just politics. It's something far more sinister and serious than that. But we still haven't defined it, have we? What is this thing that we mixed up in? And how are we to deal with it? That's a task we're taking on today, at least we're trying to disassemble this machine that is threatening to gobble up our minds every day. And to see an election in a different light. We're not concerned about whether you like this person's position or that party's position. We're looking at the whole shebang as it comes at you at several hundred miles an hour, leaving you very little room to think, to analyze, wanting from you a fast decision and wanting from you loyalty after you have been impressed enough to make that fast decision. That's all. Don't get all teary-eyed about it. It's not an emotional exercise. It's cold, calculated decision-making on one end about influencing what goes on in your head They want to control that. It's important for them to control that because it is the very seed of power. Okay. So, to remind you, our task today is to disassemble this period that we're in. What are we to make of all of this activity? And in what ways, if it's possible, in what ways can we protect ourselves from people crossing boundaries every minute of the day, trying to get into our poor head and wanting to stay there as long as it takes to convince you to act in a particular way come election day. And then they take a little pause because now you have to deal with the consequences, the actual consequences of an election, and we'll begin the cycle again. But for now, that's our task. Where are we? Are you comfortable with it? What is it that you've begun to pick up as an indication that they're trying to get into your brain and to persuade you to take action so that you become predictable in that action? You are persuaded to vote for this person, to vote for that party, and you appreciate the arguments that they're making. But we also want to consider, what arguments are they making? Well, you'll tell us that today at 888-874-4888. 888-874-4888. So it is not predetermined what your ideas are or what conclusions you have come to. We simply are interested in exploring the degree to which you have been put on notice that you are a target. They want a specific response from you, and whether you are going to permit that to happen or not to happen, what would shape your opinion in that regard? Okay, so we're clear. 888-874-4888. You see, this idea of thinking for yourself is actually an act of commission. The assumption being that you are awake. You are in tune with what's going on. And it's not necessarily a thing that persuades you. It's a bunch of other stuff that persuades you as to what your final political decision would be. So I'm asking, at this point in the development of this national election, what are you thinking? What is your attitude? What is your mindset? All right. 888-874-4888. Now, I'm trying to get an order of the calls today because I think I got calls listed from yesterday, but we'll just go ahead. Sonia, you're on the air.
Trees, there's so much that I'd like to tell you, but I'm going to go within a former program you had about the protection of the four women.
Mm-hmm.
My feelings are, as a grandmother, as a great-grandmother, we have to protect our children. And if I were in Brooklyn, where I have accessorized, I would get accessoride and invite the maximum amount of people that I can take, which would be probably 3. And we would have our umbrellas, a folding chair, and a bottle of water. And we will go to a particular spot, perhaps in front of City Hall, and sit for a half an hour, maybe an hour, remembering to take sips of water and have the umbrella over you. You also have to remember to make your reservation to return so that accessoride will come for you in an hour or half an hour, and you go back home or do whatever. But that way we're protecting. We will be the backups for the 4 children. And I would just like the seniors...
Now, you're referring to the 4 members of Congress, all of them women of color?
Yes.
Who have been targeted so far as being especially offensive to Donald Trump.
Exactly.
And the attacks have begun, and people are now concerned. In fact, there are talks as we speak about how they are to be protected, because the implication is that death threats are now part of what they have to consider in their daily lives. So what does that do to you? I mean, why do you think the course of action that you have just outlined is something you think would express your political position?
Well, I would be expressing the fact that the members of Congress, the Senate, the whole bunch of them, want to give us the impression that these young ladies are wrong, and I haven't gotten that far because there's so much going on. But we will be protecting them by showing up, and then we leave. Some others will fill in the space, and perhaps that will encourage some of the men to protect the mothers, and that would bring them out. That's what I envision.
Okay. Well, you started us off in a very good direction, which is to consider not just a problem, but what could be a potential solution. And that's good thinking. Thank you, Sonia, for contributing today. Ed from Jamaica, you're on the air. Ed from Jamaica, you're on the air.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me now? Okay, good.
Yes.
I changed my equipment as per your recommendation yesterday.
Okay.
Pertaining to the... Yes?
You're working just fine.
Yeah, I changed my equipment as per your recommendation yesterday. Pertaining to the political situation as it is, for want of a better word, you're witnessing the death of empire. I mean, this situation has deteriorated beyond even bad politics. It's just a cult of personality. People are making outrageous, outlandish, uncalled for threats, making innuendos, suggesting, fomenting the latent underlying prejudices that run through this country. And it's just pathetic. I mean, the Democratic Party is nothing. Their response was weak to begin with, and now they're trying to regroup. But the bottom line is all of these political actors, they have no interest in the people. And you're always speaking about community. You're always speaking about self-knowledge and being able to think, which I believe is at a deficit in this society today. But that's what we got to do. We got to think. We got to pull back from all of this three-ring political circus and look at what politics really means and what it's really supposed to do, which is the allocation of resources amongst the people. And that's what we're missing. All of these actions and acts and the squad and this and that. It's taken away from the crux of the matter, which is the people, the country, the state of the union, the sickness that embellishes this country and that needs to be addressed. Trump is just a symptom. He's not the focal point. And that's what when you make him the focal point, when you make all these little confrontations the focal point, you take away from the greater aspect, which is the community and the people of this country. And that's what we're missing.
Yes, but in the meantime, that it does exist as what you call a focal point. It is a focal point right now. Whether we like it or not, it has become a focal point. How do you respond?
Well, personally, I disengage from it. I mean, I can't get involved in that minutia because, to me, that's what it is. I mean, there are real problems in this world. There are real conditions: global warming, poverty, hunger. There are things that need to be addressed in a mature, humanistic fashion. And this country, I don't think, has the capability. This system doesn't have the capability to do it anymore. This system needs to be destroyed. It needs to be destroyed and needs to be replaced with something new. And it's a process. It takes time. Education, resistance, organizing. The work that we're doing, or the work that I'm doing now, I might not see us through. I probably won't see us through it. But at least I'm making a contribution to the future. Because these people are thinking about their personalities within the moment. I mean, I agree with you totally. In the beginning, when these four young women came up and they were doing their thing, they should have played. They should have pulled back and get a lay of the land. They didn't. Be that as it may, I don't think they had anybody to give them any constructive leadership or constructive guidance because the fraternity of people that they were coming into were all about themselves. This whole political, it's a cult of personality. This is the decade of self. From people taking selfies to the way our politicians represent. They don't consider the community. They don't consider the constituency. They consider themselves and how they look. And that's BS, part of my language. Because that's not what being a politician should be about. You were put there by a constituency to push a certain aspect and perspective to do benefit to the community that put you there. And when you disregard the community and just go for the personal fame or the great I am, then you need to be put out. And this whole system propagates that. There's too much money. There's too much corruption. I look at everything from a mechanical aspect. When you have an engine and you haven't serviced that engine, the engine is done. It's done. You got to replace it. You can only make minor repairs here and there, but if you haven't been servicing it, which the public hasn't been servicing this political engine, it becomes crap, and it's got to be removed and it's got to be replaced, and that's what needs to happen with the system. And it's not going to happen overnight, but it's got to start, and this could be a good starting point. This could be a definite starting point to getting rid of this and putting something that's working for the people.
But in the meantime, I think you would agree that we still have to keep moving forward, even with a bad system. What do you see as, is that a good rationale? Is that a good thinking, that we know that it's a bad system, but we are moving forward just the same? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, you can only, it comes down to a choice of the lesser of two evils, or the evil of two lessons, which unfortunately for the past 50 or 60 years, that's what it has been. I mean, yes, we have to work within what we have right now, but there has to be a push to change it. And I mean a consistent, consolidated push. And you can do both. You can do both. I mean, you can work within and without the system, but it's got to be consolidated and it's got to be focused. And that's what it hasn't been. We get too often we get caught up in these battles of personality. And the bottom line is this is not going to do it because it hasn't done it. It hasn't done it for the African American in this country for the past 450 years. It hasn't done it for the main quote unquote Caucasians in this country. You know, I mean, there's a small percentage of the population that controls everything, and that's the enemy. And that's what we have to focus on. Wealth got to be distributed. These systems of capitalism and control got to be destroyed. And meanwhile, we can settle for a status quo to keep our heads above water, but we got to focus on the long term, on getting rid of this. Or else there's not going to be anything left. It's not going to be worth worrying about who to vote for or who's running, because there's not going to be anything of this world left to speak of in the next 50 or 60 years.
Could you give us a concrete example using what is happening now as to how it might be possible to do both things at the same time?
Well, I mean, as far as the electoral process goes now, I mean, there's really nobody that, in my opinion, stands out. I mean, there are some people with some good aspects, Bernie Sanders, some other representatives of the Democratic Party, which is the only choice for one of the choices which we have right now. So we got to let that shake out. You know, you can't get caught up in emotions. You got to look at who's the best choice, because I honestly believe that this man has got to get out of office for anything to happen. Because if he continues to stay in his office, there's a lot more international trouble that we're going to see. There's a lot more economic trouble that we're going to see, and he's basically a self-absorbed egomaniac whose only interest is in, I honestly believe, is in himself and how he can position himself and his family for the future, win, lose, or draw. So, I mean, on that point, we've got to do that. But on the other hand, as far as future, we got to educate, we got to organize, we got to start to develop local political groups and take back locally. Gerrymandering, redistricting. Got to take these mechanisms back so the numbers can prevail in our favor. So we can put people, we can cultivate and groom people and put these people in a position to where they can do the right thing, where they can take the moral high ground and be effective for the people, as opposed to these clowns we got now.
All right. Well, thank you very much. You've given us quite a bit to consider. And I like the fact that if I were to give it a summary name, I'd say that you promoting a different way of doing things. Everybody says that, though. But you're talking about reshaping our political attitudes and reshaping our political actions. Thanks so much for your call today.
Thank you.
Randolph. Thank you. Randolph from Montreal, I think.
Hello, Utrice. I like to say that you're a genius to be able to put this discussion into the system of a product rather than people. And it's really, we're discussing the art of political science rather than undermining any single person. What has to be thought about is the product. The product itself, is it a full spectrum trust and healing, or do you want to support a product of full spectrum dominance? If you want to support trust and healing, you must no longer mention the product of dominance. And that way, the product of trust and healing will come to the forefront of people's minds, and they will remember this when they go to the vote at the polling station.
All right. If you could break it down a little bit so that we can follow you even more closely.
Well, I think this is a battle between, this particular situation is a battle between dominance in the world and product of trust and healing. That particular product of trust and healing is probably more pronounced in one product and not in another. That's the only without mentioning any product. That's the way you looked at it very, very well. Who is going to carry out your feelings of healing in the world and trust, and who is going to carry forth dominance and these perpetual sad situations that take place every 5 years of war and death and destruction.
So I am a voter, and I'm walking to the polling site. What should be, based on your definition, what should be my mindset?
I'm sorry, what should be what?
My mindset.
Your mindset is, do you want to take a new product, a new idea, a new person, who represents those feelings in your mind? Do you want to represent dominance and violence, or do you want to represent trust and healing? And who does this best? Forget about dominance if you don't believe in it, and just concentrate only on your telling your friends and your colleagues, this product is going to provide a much better world, a much more saner world, a much more secure world.
Well, I'll give you this. I've never heard it put this way before, but it is something that ought to be considered. It's a different way of looking at the power of the vote, or the power to influence the vote and change things. So it's something to consider. Thank you for offering it today. Thank you so much. Larry from Yonkers, what's on your mind? How do you define the times that we're in?
First of all, I'd like to... The notion that the four women who are being attacked by the president are somehow shrinking violets is to me, I don't understand it. Okay, AOC, she got rid of a long-term Democratic machine politician. This is no small feat.
You talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who unseated a 10-term congressman in her first run in Brooklyn, a district that runs or straddles Brooklyn and Queens.
I think that the problem that she has with Nancy Pelosi is they have completely different time frames. Nancy is going to be dead by the time the ill effects that Ocasio-Cortez sees coming and has been told by science is coming. And to her, it's indisputable, and everybody sits around, pretends like it's nothing. It's ridiculous. She's right, Nancy's wrong. What are you going to do?
Well, let's walk through your ideas a little bit further and bring us to the point of how and when should we make a decision as to where we go with our vote?
Well, in the first place, Utrice, you'll forgive me, unlike some people, I always vote. I vote on the theory, it's a Robert A. Heinlein quote, which I'll paraphrase. You should always vote. Even if there's nothing to vote for, there's almost always something to vote against. And for as long as I've been an adult in voting, I've been voting against. They keep sending these clowns up. They keep sending these people who get chosen by the people in power and the people who have the money to back their campaigns to get them elected. They get chosen. Then they get, groomed, and then they get elected. When is the last time anything came out of Washington that had anything to do with any of the things that people, if you ask them in polls, actually say they want? They're ignored. They are studiously ignored because they don't matter.
Well, that's the power of conditioning. People decide for the people who see themselves as powerful, decide for the people they see as powerless what the issue is. And that's the power of the sale, the marketing behind elections. Everybody wants you to believe something. So it's engineered, it's planned. It's a process of conditioning people's minds so that when they do what they are instructed to do, they would have voted. Okay? If they did something that isn't called for in the sales book, then they are not voting, really. They're considered excess baggage or irrelevant. The people who matter are the people who are voting according to the instructions.
No, the people who matter are the people who are chosen by the people who pay for the elections.
That's the same thing.
Yeah, basically.
It's the same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. How do you see the election developing so far? In terms of the power of persuasion, how do you see the election as it is developing so far?
Half of the people who are running for the Democratic Party should simply drop out. What's Cory Booker still doing there? Anybody who isn't above 10% should just get out of the race. I mean, cut to the chase here. And it would be nice to have someone actually from the Republican Party run against Trump.
Well, people are looking to see the moves that the enlightened would-be leadership are making. But so far, it's not all that enlightened. So
I'm waiting to see leadership from any party.
Interest. I'm sorry?
I'm waiting to see leadership from any party.
Well,
there's no leadership. When have you seen leadership? And what would you define leadership for me? And what is the expectations that leadership is supposed to produce?
I think we ought to redefine that. Leadership can occur in elected circles or non-elected circles. Leadership is actually following. It could be the art of following popular decisions or popular opinions. That's leadership too. Leadership doesn't mean that you're in front all the time. Leadership could be you excite combustion. You excite people to take action themselves. It's not a thing where you're always in front of the group with your flag. That's not leadership necessarily. Leadership, if we redefine it, we will come to new ways of expressing it. And that's where we are, I think, in the broad sense. We suffer from poor ideas about leadership. We think leadership means you have to win. You have to be at the head of the parade. You have to have the light shining on you all the time. You know, you have to make speeches and go to the rubber chicken dinners. That's not leadership. Leadership is defining what roles must be taken on in achieving a specific objective. And in that regard, people will have, by necessity, to take on different roles. And it's not just being the person at the head of the parade. We have the wrong concept of leadership. Leadership is cooperation. Leadership is people doing things together with a clearly defined purpose and therefore a clearly defined objective. And it doesn't have to be forever. Leadership, let's say you want to install a stop sign at the end of a very heavily trafficked block. Leadership is getting that sign installed. That's it. And then you move on to something else. Leadership is not supposed to be permanent. Leadership is that you excite among people a desire to bring their talents, their skills, their expertise, their experience, to put all of that in a pot toward a specific objective. Once that objective is met, you move on to something else. But you have accomplished what you set out to do. That is leadership. So we have to redefine leadership. And in redefining leadership, we will dispense with a lot of excess baggage that we've been carrying for decades. That is what we need. The redefinition of leadership and therefore a new way of doing things. We're not impressed anymore by a person who's been in leadership for 400 years. That's not leadership. You're dead wood by that time. And any decent leader would know when it's time to get out of that role and start creating new leadership, because presumably you have new problems to confront. See, I have a whole different idea about leadership. It's not a permanent thing. You lead, and then you cooperate and let somebody else lead and bring to the table people with all kinds of skills and experience. But we don't consider them leaders because, well, they haven't been in a leadership position. So we've got to make that a whole different determination, give it a whole different angle on leadership. I'm perfectly fine with a leader being a guy who drives a truck. Now, people would automatically dismiss that and say, well, geez, what could he do? Well, the fact is, he may have a special skill about bringing people together. He may be like the Energizer Bunny, the guy who brings and inspires people to do things. He may be the guy who knows people in the community and could bring them in. So we shouldn't be that married to the old definition of leadership. That hasn't been working. And it's not been working well. Thanks so much for your call today. We're getting close to end of program time. Ma'at, you're on the air.
Yes, greetings, beloved.
Thank you, to you too.
It's quite a complex question. Lately, as a part of me is just thinking about what self-determination is, because when I look at the Garner case, it just leaves me floored. Things are getting much worse at a rapid pace. One suggestion, though, in terms of something practical, and I heard this suggested by Dan Rather, is that the Democrats, when Trump goes off the rail and, is incoherently racist, and puts people at great risk, all of us on the street, I think that the Democrats should have 2 or 3 spokespeople who step up and deconstruct what's going on. And another thing I'm wondering about, when is someone in this country of power going to explain to the public that race is a created concept? You know, they need to come up with a strategy that breaks that down and actually explains it when so-called white people, you know, are racist or discriminatory or whatever the case is. They're actually going against their own great-great-great-great-great-great-grands. You know, that's the truth. So that's what, and the technology in hand, that is a part of the problem in many ways. That's why people are so dumb, you know, and you could see some of those rallies like last night with Trump, and you know, whatever lie that comes out of his mouth is okay. And it has to do with the surveillance and the control and the predictive programming.
Well, it has to do with people identifying in the ways that have been working for them for decades. In their view, the situation was fixed a long time ago. The problem we're having is that there are too many people who don't believe that we have solved the problem. It's simple, it's direct, the formula works, so why trouble it? And the other part of it is it gets most people riled up. There is no real sensible response to this issue of race. There isn't any. And in the intervening decades that we've had people, the leaders, define these things for us, they define them in their own interests. And that's understandable. We have to inevitably come to the conclusion we need to study what politics is. And how do we do it? In the end, it's a sales job. People being told things that would seem to be of benefit to them. Who wants to belong to a losing party? Or nobody leader? That's the American way. You're right. You're absolutely right. It gives you, when you're right, it gives you permission to do all kinds of things that are unprincipled, undemocratic, and plain wrong. But you will be forgiven for that because your intention is to support what was given to you as the formula for a specific group of people looking to find their way, find all kinds of things in power, and in, quote, leadership, unquote. We're very confused. So we have to rethink this whole thing about leadership, because even leadership on the, quote, right side of things, they're confused. They really don't get it, what they ought to be doing. A plain thing, it's incomprehensible, or we have to go pretty soon. It's incomprehensible that we see all these problems and we can't figure out how to solve them with the materials and the knowledge and expertise and experience that we supposedly have. So we have to do something else. We'll continue the discussion tomorrow, and thanks so much for contributing and listening today. Bye-bye.